I never could have imagined it, not even in my darkest hours, not even in my most twisted dreams. That was just 1 month before my wedding. I would lose the woman I had once loved so deeply. I forgot what it meant to love myself. My name is Richard Callahan. I'm 38 years old, senior structural engineer, former lead designer at Lutz Engineering based in Austin, Texas. I've spent the last decade building towers, bridges, stadiums, things meant to stand forever. But I never expected my foundation to crack. And what made it worse? She wasn't taken by a stranger. She was taken by the one man I had trusted more than anyone else in this world, my boss, and more painfully, the man I had called my best friend for over 20 years, Graham Lutz. I once said his name out loud just to hear how it sounded after the truth had been exposed. It didn't hurt. Not really. It just echoed hollow like the shell of an abandoned building trembling in the wind. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. Has your heart ever been broken? Not by one person, but by two at the same time. Someone you loved, and someone you would have taken a bullet for. If this story touches something inside you, hit the like button, leave a comment, tell me where you're watching from and whether you've ever trusted the wrong people, and subscribe because this story doesn't end in silence, it ends in justice. But first, let me take you back to the moment where everything began to fall apart. Elena Brooks, that was her name. 34, strategic communications consultant. She had this way of walking into a room like every light naturally found her face. I met her 5 years ago during the rollout phase of the South Point Bridge expansion. She was brought in to handle the city's PR. I was the guy reviewing tension load simulations with a Sharpie-streaked hard hat and an inbox full of unresolved permit delays. She asked me where the coffee machine was. I told her the truth. "You're better off bringing your own." She laughed. I fell. It didn't happen all at once. Love rarely does. It starts with shared lunches, then inside jokes, then glances that last a little too long. By the time I realized I'd built my life around her presence, she was already inside it. When I proposed, I did it quietly. Just the two of us. No photographers, no rooftop dinners, just her and me at the park bench near Barton Springs, where she once said she could finally breathe. She said yes. She cried. And for a moment, I believed I had found something permanent. Looking back, maybe that was my first mistake. Thinking permanence was something you could build with someone who studied public image for a living. As for Graham, he entered my life long before she did. We met during my second year out of undergrad. I was 23, broke and hungry to prove I could design the kind of structures that lasted generations. He was already a name in the industry, not quite a mogul but close, a man who shook hands with mayors and signed city contracts like he was ordering lunch. He took a liking to me. "You don't talk like the rest," he said once. "What does that mean?" I asked. "You talk like you've got something to lose." I didn't back then, but maybe that's what made me dangerous in his eyes. Or useful. He gave me projects that should have gone to senior engineers, put me in rooms I didn't belong in, called me partner material before I even had a parking spot. When my father died, Graham sent flowers. When I broke my wrist on site in 2015, he covered my pay and told HR not to file it as leave. When I bought my first condo, he gave me advice on mortgage brokers. He wasn't just a boss. He was, or at least I believed he was, family, which is why it took me a while to see the signs. Because betrayal doesn't shout. It whispers. And I wasn't listening closely enough. Not yet. The first red flag came wrapped in a joke. It was at the holiday party, 2 years ago. Elena had just complimented Graham's tie. He grinned, looked at me and said, "Rick always did have good taste, whether it's in materials or women." Everyone laughed, even Elena. But I didn't. Later that night, I told her it made me uncomfortable. She rolled her eyes and said, "He's just being Graham." And I believed her, because I wanted to. But after that, little things started shifting. Graham started calling Elena more often media prep, he said. He began requesting she sit in on our project briefings, external optics, he called it. One time he invited her to a client dinner, without me. When I asked, he simply said, "Didn't want to overload the table." I nodded, but something sank inside me. The weekend she left, it rained. She didn't pack much. Just 2 suitcases, a carry-on, and the espresso machine her sister had given her. She didn't cry. I didn't either. I stood by the kitchen island, hands in my pockets, while she unplugged the toaster. "You'll find someone better suited for you," she said. I wasn't looking for someone suited. I was looking for you." She didn't respond. The door clicked shut behind her like a final blueprint approval, irrevocable clinical signed in silence. I stayed in that kitchen until the sun went down. Then I went to the closet and found the garment bag holding my tux. I zipped it open, touched the fabric, and smiled. Because in that moment I realized something important. They had taken something from me, but they had also permitted me. Permission to stop protecting them. Permission to remember who I was before I became someone else's shadow. Permission to rebuild this time with steel and fire. On Monday, I returned to work. I acted as if nothing had happened, because that's what people like Graham understand best: calm compliance. It lulls them. But behind every polite nod, I was listening. I started checking timestamps. Elena's badge logs at the office late nights when I was told she was working from home. Graham's calendar invites the ones marked off-site, confidential. I copied everything. More than that, I started reading the updated specs for our biggest project yet, the Avalon high-rise. And that's when I saw it. Minor adjustments, but they added up. Column reinforcement lowered from grade 5 to grade 4 steel. Window load resistance tolerance reduced by 12%. Safety margins narrowed to within acceptable limits. But here's the catch: they weren't acceptable. Not under city code, not under professional ethics, and not under the name I had spent a decade building. They'd falsified numbers. They were cutting corners. And they were using my name on documents that I never signed. That was the moment the heartbreak turned to clarity. And clarity, that's when the plan started. The week before my resignation, I took a day off. Graham thought I was clearing my head. In truth, I met with someone. A man named Lewis Grant, co-founder of the firm, is now retired. He always liked me. Said I reminded him of himself before the yacht and the lawsuits. I told him what I'd found. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "Rick, I made a mistake when I handed Graham the reins, but I still own 6% voting stock. And if you bring me enough to move the board, I'll vote with you." That was all I needed. The last thing I did before walking out of the firm for good was leave an envelope on Graham's desk. Inside, copies of falsified reports, internal emails between him and Elena, whistleblower submission receipts filed with the city, a single note that read, "Foundations don't collapse on their own. They fail when someone ignores the warning signs." I handed in my key card, nodded at the receptionist, and stepped into the sun. Free, but not finished. Not yet. You don't see it until you look backward. The signs, I mean. The way she used to pause before answering questions that weren't complicated. The subtle way his hand lingered on her lower back at company functions half a second too long. The inside jokes they'd exchange over lunch, the ones I wasn't part of. And then there were the silences. The kinds of silences that aren't empty. They're loaded. They hum under the surface like a fault line waiting to shift. But when you're in love, when you trust someone, you interpret hesitation as carefulness. You tell yourself everyone's just busy. You believe that your mentor and your fiancé are just getting along well. You tell yourself things that sound like the truth. Because the alternative feels like standing at the edge of a building you helped design and realizing the cracks aren't just in the concrete, they're in you. I met Graham Lutz when I was 21, still in grad school, still renting a shoebox apartment, still convinced I could outwork anything. He came to give a guest lecture on load efficiency in large-scale cantilever design. Half the students were half asleep, but I was in the front row, taking notes, asking questions. After class, he pulled me aside. "You're either going to burn out fast," he said, "or you're going to own this industry one day." He gave me his card. I emailed him that night. 2 months later, I was interning at Lutz Engineering, doing coffee runs, modeling steel truss layouts in Revit, and trying not to screw up markups on his drawings. I worked under him for 11 years, earned every stripe the long way. There were stretches where I practically lived in the office weeks where I didn't leave before midnight. He'd pass by, clap my shoulder, say things like, "Nobody notices the guy holding the structure up until it falls," and I took that as respect. I realize now, it might have been a warning. The night I first brought Elena to a company gala, Graham's reaction was almost imperceptible. Almost. He raised his glass, looked her up and down once smoothly, and said, "Well, Rick, you've outdone yourself." Then he kissed her hand. She laughed. Said he was charming in a dangerous kind of way. That phrase stuck with me. I remember it because that was the first night she forgot to mention me in a story. She was talking with one of our lead architects, David, telling some tale about a wine bar in Rome, a missed train, and a sunset. It was a story I'd lived with her, but she told it as if she'd been alone, or with someone else. I brushed it off. Told myself it didn't mean anything. People forget details all the time, but now I know people don't forget who they were with when they were in love, not unless they're trying to rewrite the narrative. Graham started asking her to sit in on more meetings after that. He said it was good for optics. Clients liked seeing a woman at the table. I knew Elena was good at what she did. Smart, presentable, always knew the right thing to say. But slowly the meetings started happening without me. Budget reviews, material sourcing decisions, subcontractor negotiations, things that were squarely in my wheelhouse. When I asked, he'd grin and say, "Relax, Rick. You've got the brain. She's just there for the polish." That phrase, "just there for the polish." It sounded harmless at the time, but now I hear the contempt under it, the condescension, the implication that I was the functional part and she was the finish. Turns out he wanted both. You don't notice your friend pulling away until you're left holding the rope. There was a time Graham and I used to get drinks every other Friday. We'd talk shop trade stories and argue about code interpretations. That stopped a year before the wedding. He said he was traveling more, said we should catch up soon. Then he stopped replying to messages that weren't about deadlines. It didn't occur to me that he had found something else to fill that space, something or someone closer. And Elena, she started changing too. She stopped asking about my site visits, stopped leaving notes in my lunch, stopped talking about our honeymoon plans. Once I came home early from a supplier meeting. She was sitting in the dark with her laptop open, headphones in. I walked up behind her, about to kiss the top of her head, but then I saw it. She was watching a video of Graham giving a TEDx talk, smiling, the way she used to smile at me. She closed the laptop quickly, said she was just doing research, said it was for the PR campaign. But something cracked in me that night. I didn't confront her. I just stood there and remembered what silence feels like. When she left quietly. No fights, no cheating confession, just the line everyone uses when they want to avoid looking like the villain. "This isn't about you. I just need to find myself." But she didn't go far. 3 days later, she showed up in a LinkedIn photo at a fundraising dinner for local infrastructure innovation, standing next to Graham, his hand on her waist. Her eyes were shining in a way that used to be mine. That photo didn't go viral. It didn't make the papers, but it detonated everything inside me, and I realized something else. They weren't just together. They were covering for each other. Because while the world thought they were building something beautiful, I had already started to uncover the cracks beneath it. The first document I pulled was the Avalon load projection draft. The numbers didn't add up, and not in a simple miscalculation kind of way. They were intentional. They were manipulated to make the budget work, lowering structural steel strength ratings, skipping secondary support beams, using post-tension cable placement designs that barely passed safety thresholds. It was clever, invisible to someone who didn't look too closely. But I did, and each line I read felt like betrayal with a calculator. My name was still attached to the preliminary design, but the modifications weren't mine. They had changed it without telling me, then submitted it under shared revision authority. Elena had signed off on the PR release. Graham had approved the technical specs. If something went wrong, my name would be on the collapse. That's when I stopped grieving and started planning. Some men seek revenge with rage. I don't. I built it, carefully, quietly, with blueprints, not bullets. Because revenge isn't about destruction. It's about restoration, restoring your name, your dignity, and reminding those who erased you that silence was never weakness. It was patience. It was a calculation. It was the sound of a man waiting for the right moment to let the truth do what it always does, expose and level. Revenge doesn't begin with anger. It begins with access. And when you're the man who spent a decade quietly holding the digital keys to a company's foundation, you know exactly where the cracks are. And more importantly, you know where they forgot to sweep the dust. The thing about people like Graham and Elena, they think damage control is deleting the obvious. The flagged emails, the contract drafts, the Slack threads where they got too comfortable. But what they never consider is the metadata. The things they don't see because they don't believe anyone's watching. And I was, for months. Even before the breakup, even before I saw them together, even before Elena looked me in the eye and said, "You deserve someone who sees the world the way you do." She said that line like it was closure. What she didn't know was, I had already started pulling access logs that morning. It started with a simple file, Avalon Design Final Rev C DWG, buried in the shared drive, flagged archived. But when I opened the Properties tab, I saw something interesting. The file had been downloaded to an external drive at 11:04 p.m. on May 17th. That was the night she told me she was working late from home. That same night, the company server logged a remote login from Graham's credentials from an IP address not associated with his condo or the office. It came from a short-term rental property in East Austin, a place registered under an LLC called EDR Holdings. Guess who filed that LLC? Elena Danielle Ross Brooks, her full legal name. I smiled when I saw it, because in all her carefulness she had forgotten one detail. She used her real middle name, the one she once told me she hated, the one she tried to bury when she rebranded herself as Elena Brooks. But computers don't care about personal reinvention. They remember everything. From there, the threads unraveled quickly. There were invoices from suppliers being funneled through shell vendors, marked up, then rebilled back to Lutz Engineering at inflated rates. The payments were approved by Graham, the vendor LLC's, Elena's signature on the formation documents. They weren't just manipulating blueprints. They were laundering money through subcontractor fronts, using the Avalon project as a personal cash cow, assuming no one would trace it. After all, the face of Avalon was still me, the legacy designer, the steady hand. I was their shield, until I wasn't. I copied everything. I didn't forward, I didn't email, I printed, bound, labeled, filed in duplicate. Because if there's one thing I've learned, digital trails vanish. Paper doesn't. I created a physical dossier, something weighty, undeniable. I wanted the evidence to make a sound when it landed on the table. I titled it Project Avalon Undermined Integrity, Internal Findings by R. Callahan. Not to be dramatic, but because I knew I only needed to hand it to the right person. Once. That person turned out to be someone I never expected to still have my back. Maya Thorne, head of compliance. A woman Graham had tried to force into early retirement 2 years ago. She stayed on part-time after the board stepped in. Everyone thought she was just the paperwork lady, but she remembered me. She also remembered Graham skipping the required reporting on a San Antonio bridge extension back in 2019. She'd flagged it. He had buried it. So when I walked into her office with a sealed envelope and said, "I need you to look at something before it disappears," she didn't ask questions. She just nodded, pulled out a red pen and said, "Shut the door." 2 days later, she called me back in. Her voice was flat, controlled, but her hands were trembling just slightly as she passed the dossier back. "This is enough for an audit," she said, "and a full board hearing." I exhaled slowly. But she added, "You have to understand what you're starting. This isn't just about them. This will pull the company apart." I looked her in the eye and said, "It's already apart. They just haven't noticed the fractures yet." She nodded. "Then I'll forward this to internal counsel. You didn't give it to me. It arrived anonymously." And just like that, the first real domino tipped. Now here's where the twist came in. Because just as I was preparing to walk away and let the evidence speak, Elena emailed me. Subject line: "If you're still you," 6 words, 8 months after she left, 3 weeks after I triggered the audit. No greeting, no apology, just, "If you're still you, then you won't do this. You know how the media twists things. This won't end the way you think it will. Please don't ruin everything we built." I stared at the screen for a long time. What did we build? The arrogance of it. The assumption that I still considered any of it shared. That after everything I might still protect her. I typed my reply in 5 words. "You already ruined it, Elena." Then I hit send and archived the thread for future use. That week, the city halted construction on the Avalon high-rise. The official reason, pending review of structural compliance documentation. But everyone in the industry knew what that meant. Phone calls stopped. Clients grew cold. Vendors paused shipments. And Graham, he finally noticed the cracks. Because for the first time in 20 years, he called me, and I didn't answer. The next day I walked past the job site. The towering frame stood frozen mid-air, exposed girders like bones against the gray sky. A gust of wind hit the caution tape and made it flutter like a warning. I stood there, helmet under arm, watching. And I remembered the first draft of that project when it had just been a sketch on my desk. I remembered how proud I felt to finally design something that would define the skyline. And I remembered what it felt like, to have that legacy hijacked by the two people I trusted most. But not anymore. Now Avalon would be their legacy, not mine. And when the collapse came, not the physical one, but the reputational one, it wouldn't be quiet. It would echo through every meeting room they ever walked into, every whisper behind their backs, every closed-door offer they'd never receive again. This wasn't vengeance. It was a structural correction. I wasn't angry. I was precise. And the thing about precision, it doesn't miss. They scheduled the emergency board meeting for a Wednesday. No warning, no agenda in the calendar invite, just a single subject line, RE, Immediate Governance Review, Avalon High Rise. When you've worked in the same industry for 20 years, you know what that means. It means the gloves are off. It means the shareholders have questions. And someone's about to be fed to the wolves. I arrived 15 minutes early, not because I was eager, but because I wanted to watch them walk in. There's something about that moment when powerful people sense they've lost control but haven't figured out why yet. The way their eyes scan the room, the false confidence in their gait, the quick nods they give to assistants as if to say, still in charge. Graham walked in with a perfect Windsor knot and an empty smile. Elena wasn't far behind, hair-tight lips, neutral phone in hand. She didn't look at me. Smart. I didn't look at her either. The boardroom smelled like citrus wood polish and old strategy. 12 chairs, 2 carafes of water, 1 long glass wall overlooking downtown Austin. I took my seat at the far end of the table, not beside Graham, not beside anyone really, just opposite. He clocked it. I saw the flicker in his eyes like a sensor tripped, but the alarm hadn't sounded yet. The chairwoman Lillian Trask entered last, steel hair, navy blazer, a voice like a bank vault. "We'll begin," she said without sitting down. No pleasantries, no coffee orders, no agenda slides, just those 3 words. And the tension snapped tight. First came the facts. Maya Compliance stood and presented her findings like a surgeon reading vital signs. No drama, just dates, numbers, signatures. Invoices approved by Graham. Documents altered after final engineering review. PR statements signed off by Elena with figures that didn't match the submitted architectural plans. No one interrupted. Then she placed a single sheet in front of each board member. This, she said, is a side-by-side comparison of the approved blueprint and the version submitted to the city. No one spoke. But I watched their faces change. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't need volume to hit like a hammer. When Maya finished, Lillian turned to Graham. "Would you like to respond?" He exhaled through his nose, folded his hands. "First, let me say this. I take full responsibility for any oversight under my leadership, but I'd caution us all against jumping to conclusions based on selective data. There are nuances to these decisions, project pressures, budgeting realities, shifting client expectations. He was doing it, filling the room with fog. I'd seen him do it to city officials, to suppliers, to auditors. He was betting he could do it again." Elena stayed silent, eyes forward, fingers clenched beneath the table. I said nothing. Not yet. Then came the unexpected voice. Lewis Grant, co-founder, silent since the meeting began, retired but still holding 6% voting stock. He leaned forward slowly. "Graham," he said, "I've sat in this room while you charmed your way through 6 messes. But this isn't just a mess. This is fraud." Graham blinked. "With respect, Lewis." "No," Louis said. "Don't with respect me. I built this company with my own hands. We made mistakes. We owned them. You You built a stage and handed the mic to PR while gutting the steel from our backbone. The silence after that was loud. Elena shifted in her seat, eyes darting toward the board members. She looked like she was calculating which direction to run if the fire spread. I still said nothing. Let them burn themselves. The meeting went on for nearly 2 hours. Every 10 minutes another document landed. Another inconsistency surfaced. Another nod from the board chair. By the end, it was no longer a question of whether something had gone wrong. It was just a matter of how far they were willing to let it go before cutting the rope. That's when Lillian asked the question, "I'd been waiting for Mr. Callahan, would you like to add anything?" I looked up calmly, folded my hands. Then I spoke. "I'm not here to seek revenge. I'm not here to ask for my job back. I'm here because my name was used without my knowledge on documents that could have endangered lives." I paused. Let the weight of that settle. I joined this firm because I believed in what it stood for: safety, excellence, legacy. That belief is why I can't sit silently and let others rewrite my integrity to cover their ambition. That was all I said. No theatrics, just truth. Raw and surgical. Lillian nodded. And with that, my part was done. The board moved to a closed vote. We were asked to step outside. Graham walked past me, jaw tight. Elena didn't look back. We stood in the hallway waiting. 3 minutes, then 5, then 10. Then the door opened. A staffer called us back in. Lillian stood at the head of the table, arms crossed. "The board has voted," she said. She turned to Graham. "Effective immediately, your authority as managing director is suspended pending formal investigation. You are to refrain from all project involvement and company communications. To Elena, your services are no longer required. Legal will coordinate your exit process." Neither spoke, neither protested. They had known before the doors even closed that it was over. I stood still, not victorious, not smug, just steady, like I had always been. Only now they were the ones unraveling. Afterward in the elevator, Elena finally turned to me. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Did you plan this from the beginning?" I met her gaze. "No," I said. "But once you gave me the blueprints, I knew exactly where to start." She didn't answer, and I didn't offer more. Let her sit in the silence, with the version of me she never bothered to understand. That night I drove out past the city limits, to a hilltop west of town, quiet, empty, still. From there I could see the Avalon site in the distance. Cranes frozen midair, lights dimmed, the steel frame reaching into a sky that no longer trusted it. I stood there for a long time, wind on my face. The phone is silent in my pocket, and I felt something I hadn't in months. Not vindication, not triumph, alignment, like something had clicked back into place, like the structure inside me was finally sound again. They took a lot from me. My relationship, my reputation, my peace. But what they never understood was, you can't collapse a man who knows how to rebuild himself. Fallout doesn't happen all at once. It spreads, quiet at first, a line here, a call there. Then suddenly, everything starts to shift. 3 days after the board meeting, I got the first message. It was from a former client. A simple text. "Just saw the news. Didn't realize it went that deep. We always trusted your designs." 4 words that mattered. We always trusted you, not the company, not your boss, you. That's when I knew the silence was cracking. Not mine, theirs. It started with a leak. Someone at the firm, maybe someone tired of watching it rot, sent the internal audit to a local journalist. By the time the article hit the Tribune, it had all the right keywords: engineering giant under fire, blueprint manipulation, whistleblower alleges cover-up. My name wasn't in the piece. Not directly. But anyone in the industry could connect the dots. Within hours, my LinkedIn inbox exploded. Former clients, former interns, colleagues from other cities, people I hadn't spoken to in years. Some just said I knew it wasn't you. Others asked if I was okay. Some offered jobs. I didn't reply. Not yet. Because I wasn't looking for applause. Just accountability. And it was still coming. Meanwhile, Graham went silent. No press statement, no rebuttal. Just a short announcement from the company's legal team: internal review ongoing. No comment at this time. But Elena, she moved faster. 3 days after the article dropped, I got an envelope at my apartment, hand-delivered. Inside, a signed affidavit, a letter of personal clarification, and a USB drive. The letter read, "Richard, I know nothing. I say will undo the damage. But I never meant to implicate you. You were never supposed to be involved. This was about survival. I hope you can understand that." Elena's survival. That's what she called it. As if betrayal was a reflex. As if dismantling what we built together could be excused by fear. I plugged in the USB. It contained a folder titled Backup, just in case. Inside, audio recordings, email threads, a scanned journal entry from her notes. All of it points to Graham's coercion. Turns out he had been manipulating more than just blueprints. He pressured her, threatened to derail her career if she didn't cooperate. He used their relationship, what little of it had been real, as leverage. That's when I felt something unexpected. Not sympathy, pity. Because Elena wasn't just careless. She had been used. And in trying to hold on to power, she'd become a footnote in a scandal she never fully controlled. I didn't respond to her letter, but I forwarded the USB anonymously to the firm's legal counsel. Let them sort it out. I wasn't in this for revenge. I was in this for the truth. And the truth had enough weight of its own. The next shift came from someone I hadn't heard from in nearly a decade. Catherine Reyes. She used to be a junior architect on one of my earliest bridge projects. Smart, blunt. Always had clay under her nails from those tiny physical models she used to build. She left the firm 5 years ago. Started her boutique consultancy out of Portland. Now she ran a firm of 40 people and 3 regional contracts. She messaged me late one night, "Rick, I've been watching everything. You didn't just protect your name. You protected all of ours who still believe in the work. Come build with us. I've got room, and no tolerance for egos. Let's talk." I didn't answer right away. I just reread her message. Then I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window of my small apartment, bare walls, unopened boxes, the tux still zipped in its garment bag near the closet. For the first time in a long time, I felt something unfamiliar. Possibility. Not nostalgia, not regret, just space. Room to design again. On my terms. 2 weeks passed. The news cycle moved on. Graham resigned for personal reasons. The firm stated rebuilding trust. Elena disappeared from the website. Her LinkedIn went dark. And I finally started breathing again. Not shallow, not guarded, just steady. One evening I walked past the Avalon site. No workers, no motion, just metal bones waiting to be reimagined. A young couple stood at the fence beside me. The man said, "Heard that tower had some kind of fraud scandal." The woman nodded, glad they caught it before people got hurt. I didn't say a word, but inside something settled, because no one said my name. And that was exactly how I wanted it. Let the building stand or fall, but let the silence tell the truth. Later that week I met with Catherine. A corner table, black coffee, blueprints between us. She asked what I wanted. I told her I want to design things that don't lie, structures that stand because the math is sound, not because the PR team made them look good. She smiled. "You're hired." And just like that, I wasn't rebuilding the past. I was building something new. You see, they thought they were writing my ending. They thought they were closing the book. But all they did was free my hands. And with those hands, I drew a new beginning. Not to prove anything, just because I could. Because when everything falls apart, the only thing left is the truth you stood on. And I had built mine on bedrock. There's something sacred about starting over in silence. No press release, no comeback headline, no declarations. Just a new chair, a clean desk, and the sound of graphite scratching across tracing paper. That's how I began again. In the corner studio at Reyes Collaborative Design, overlooking a narrow Portland street flanked by brick warehouses and fading murals. The first morning, Catherine handed me a small stack of project sheets. "Your call," she said. "No clocks, no egos. Just build what feels honest." And so I did. Steel barns for community shelters, a pedestrian bridge for a flood-prone town, a veterans memorial shaped like a broken beam slowly reconnected in tension. Structures that mattered. Not because they reached the sky, but because they touched the ground people stood on. 3 months passed. My name slowly returned to meetings quietly without drama. A subcontractor from Montana emailed, "Glad you're still designing." An old classmate wrote, "I had a feeling you'd land right side up." I didn't respond to most of them. Not out of pride, out of peace. Sometimes not replying is how you protect what you've finally rebuilt. Then came the Design Expo, annual, downtown, industry-wide. Reyes Collaborative had a small booth, nothing flashy, just a simple 3D model of our new low-cost modular housing concept plus rotating sketches on a flat screen. I wasn't planning to speak. I wasn't even scheduled to attend. But Catherine asked, "We need your steadiness," she said. "People trust your voice." So I went. Pressed shirt, quiet shoes, no name badge. I arrived early, walked the aisles. Most people didn't notice me, which is exactly how I liked it, until I saw her. Standing just outside the far lecture room, facing away, long coat, dark hair, tied low profile, angled to the light as she flipped through a program. Elena. 3 months. No contact. No updates. But here she was. Not on a panel. Not with Graham. Just present. Watching. Alone. She didn't see me at first. I stood behind a support pillar hidden between banners of upcoming green architecture initiatives and a display for sustainable urban playgrounds. It hit me then how small she seemed. Not in stature. In energy. She used to carry a room like a storm dressed in silk. Now she moved like someone avoiding her echo. Eventually her eyes swept the space, slow, uncertain. And then she saw me. She didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She just walked. Right to me. "Rick," she said softly. "Elena." Silence. Not angry, not sharp. Just the kind of quiet that only exists between two people who used to plan a future and now occupy different timelines. She looked older, not in years, in weight, like someone who had carried something too long without setting it down. "I read about the Veterans Memorial," she said. "I saw the renderings. They were beautiful. Thank you." Another pause. "Then I'm not here to cause trouble." "I know." She glanced around, then met my eyes. "I wanted to ask you something, and I'll leave if it's out of line." I waited. No encouragement, no resistance, just space. She exhaled. "I'm trying to rebuild a bit of who I was before everything. Quietly. I've started consulting again, small firms, nothing major, but one of them is bidding on the Forest Ridge Pavilion. Your team's submitting too." I already knew. We weren't worried about the competition. "I won't cross paths if it's a problem," she added quickly. "I just wanted to be transparent. I didn't want you to find out from someone else and think I was circling." "Are you?" I asked. She blinked. Circling, I tilted my head slightly, trying to get back into my orbit. Her expression broke for a second, just long enough for me to see the fracture. Not longing, not manipulation, grief, not for me, for the version of herself she had walked away from. "I'm not," she said finally. "I'm not circling. I'm trying to make peace with the part of my life where I stopped telling the truth. And I think it started before you. Maybe long before." I nodded. No agreement. Acknowledgement. That was all I had to offer. And maybe all she wanted. She looked down, then back up. "There's no ask here, Rick. No agenda. No comeback. I just wanted to stand in front of you. As me. Without Graham. Without a contract in my hand. Just me." I looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time in a long time I didn't see the woman who betrayed me. I saw a woman who finally understood what it meant to be stripped of excuses, and what remained was quiet, flawed, human, but no longer dangerous. "I hope you do well," I said. "Not to be kind, to be truthful, not better than us," I added. "But well." She smiled, just a flicker. "Fair enough." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something small, a black velvet box. I froze, but she opened it not toward me, toward herself, inside the ring I gave her. Still flawless, still simple, still untouched. "I couldn't pawn it," she said. "Didn't feel right." She set the box down on the display table beside a model of our modular classroom units. Give it to someone who won't forget what it means, she said. Or throw it in a river. Up to you. She turned to leave, then paused. Elena, I said. She looked back. Thank you for not turning it into a scene. She half smiled. Too tired for scenes. Then she was gone, and I stood there alone beside the ring I once gave her to mark the start of forever. Now just a symbol of what can be left behind when you finally decide not to carry it anymore. That night I didn't take the ring home. I left it in the expo's lost and found with no note, no claim ticket. Let the universe decide. I did not need relics, only frameworks. And I had a dozen more to draw in the morning. It started with a voicemail, clipped professional, the kind that doesn't ask, it informs. Mr. Callahan, this is Evelyn Raines, head of civic development for the city of Portland. We've reviewed your work on the Veterans Memorial and the Flood Bridge collaboration. We'd like you to lead the design commission for the Riverview Civic Complex. I listened to the message twice, then a third time, not because I didn't believe it, but because part of me still measured everything with suspicion, like a man checking beams in a house that once collapsed under his feet. The Riverview Civic Complex was no small ask, a full city block. Public performance space, library, annex, housing integration. Budget $84 million, high stakes, high visibility, high pressure. I met with the committee 2 days later in a conference room lined with renderings and political tension. Evelyn, the chairwoman, didn't blink. We want this project to mean something, she said, not just look impressive. We've had enough of those. She didn't say names, but I knew what she meant. They'd had their fill of men like Graham, visionaries who cut corners and sold risk in elegant wrapping. I gave her the only pitch I knew how to deliver. If you want poetry, hire someone else. If you want something that holds through storms, I'm your guy. She smiled. You're hired. It should have felt like triumph. But when I walked out of that room, I didn't feel bigger. I felt smaller, more aware of the weight. Because leading something doesn't just mean you're the architect. It means you're the one they'll blame when it all goes wrong. And after everything I'd just survived, I wasn't interested in carrying other people's mistakes. Not again. So I started differently. I didn't draw alone. I opened the table. Interns, surveyors, civil consultants, residents, anyone who had to live with what we were building. They had a seat, and little by little something strange started happening. People didn't just nod. They challenged. They added. They cared. And for the first time since I put my name on a blueprint, I didn't feel like I had to defend it. I just had to listen. 2 weeks into schematic planning, a name crossed my desk I hadn't seen in years, Jason Liu. He was a junior structural analyst once under my wing at Lutz Engineering. I remembered him clearly. Sharp mind, shy posture, always took notes like every sentence was sacred. Graham once called him too delicate for the real world, tried to push him into admin. I fought to keep him in R&D. Eventually Jason left. Quietly. No notice. Now here he was. Resume submitted to Rhea's collaborative. No note. Just a line at the bottom. Still learning from your old design notes. Hope there's room to build again. I asked Catherine to call him in. She did. He showed up early, same as always. Taller now, a little more tired behind the eyes, but still carrying that spark the one Graham tried to smother. I interviewed him myself. Halfway through, he paused and said, I still remember what you told me during the South Point project. Good structure isn't about holding weight. It's about where you let it pass through. I think I finally understand what that means. I smiled, because I wasn't sure I did, back then. But now I knew exactly what it meant. It meant trust. It meant delegation. It meant not needing to hold everything yourself. I hired him on the spot. As the Riverview design evolved, so did the team. People argued, disagreed, redlined. But every time I looked at our sketches, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. A blueprint not based on control, but on contribution. And with each layer, we added sightlines, elevation flow, utility routing. I felt lighter, like I was building something that didn't just work. It belonged. Not to me, to everyone who touched it. Then one evening, Jason knocked on my office door. He held a copy of one of my original stress simulations for the project. His face was tight. I ran it again, he said. There's a tolerance issue in the roof span. I frowned. I had run that same math 3 times. It held. But I didn't dismiss him. Show me. He did. And he was right. A variable I'd overlooked, a thermal expansion factor linked to a new composite steel we were testing. It threw the margin off by 3.8%. Still safe. But it doesn't sound. In the past, someone like Graham would have buried that. Would have said, let it ride. We'll monitor it later. Instead, I circled this calculation, looked at Jason, and said, good catch. Then I walked to the main drafting table, erased the entire roofline model, and started again. No drama, no pride, just a correction, the way it should be. Later that night, Jason sent me a message. Thanks for not brushing me off. I used to think being right was about being respected, but now I think maybe it's just about being heard. I replied, they're the same thing, in the right place. The next morning I stood at the site where Riverview would rise. Just an empty lot now. But I closed my eyes and tried to feel its weight. Not the concrete, not the deadlines, not the politics, just the future. And it didn't feel heavy. It felt balanced. Because I had learned that the strongest foundation isn't concrete, it's integrity. And for the first time in years, mine was finally holding. The envelope arrived on a Thursday, handwritten, no return address. The kind of envelope you don't see anymore. Heavy stock, slightly smudged ink, and inside no explanation, no introduction. Just my name in cursive across the top of a folded sheet. Graham. I stared at the letter for a full minute before opening it. Not because I feared what it might say, but because I didn't want to give it power. And still, I read every word. Rick, I doubt you'll respond to this. And I can't say I'd blame you. I've spent a long time convincing myself I was the smartest man in every room. And for a while, maybe I was. But arrogance has a way of turning intelligence into blindness. I didn't write to apologize. Not really. Apologies only matter when the damage can still be undone. And I know I passed that point long before you ever said a word. I burned more bridges than I ever built. But yours, that one mattered. I'm leaving. Not just the firm, the country. Somewhere no one knows my name. You don't need to forgive me. I wouldn't trust that either. But I wanted you to know if anyone ever asks who the better man was, it was never me. I folded the letter in half and placed it on my desk. Didn't shred it, didn't burn it, just left it sitting there like a rusted key to a door that no longer existed. Because truthfully, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel hate either. I just felt finished. The next day, I received a message from the City Archives office. Someone had requested a transcript of the Avalon high-rise audit. The request was filed under a temporary firm founded last month in Lisbon, Portugal. There was no name attached. But I didn't need one. Graham wasn't trying to bury his history. He was trying to understand it on his terms. And maybe that was all he ever really wanted. Control, even in failure. That evening, I walked through downtown alone. Portland was colder in the fall. Steel gray skies, sidewalks lined with brittle leaves, the sound of construction cranes humming at the edge of silence. I passed by a bookstore window. Inside, a woman was reading aloud to a group of kids, animated, gentle. She looked nothing like Elena. And yet something about her voice, measured intentional, reminded me of the way Elena used to explain things during client pitches. Before the lies, before the hush, before the glass between us cracked so wide we stopped reaching. I hadn't thought about her in weeks, truly. Not her perfume, not her hand on mine, not the ring box she left behind at the design expo. But Graham's letter. It dug something up. Not longing, not pain, just the question. The one I had buried so deep I forgot it was still breathing. Did she ever love me? At all. I don't know why it mattered, but it did. Not for closure, for clarity. Because sometimes you can move forward without answers. But other times, the absence of an answer becomes the weight. The next morning, I found a folder on my desk at the Reyes office. Catherine had left it there with a note, client background check. New proposal from a European firm. Thought you might want to see this before we respond. I opened it casually. Midway through the documents, a name hit me like cold water. Brooks and Nova, International Communications and Design Consultancy. CEO Elena Ross Brooks, Lisbon, Portugal. The address matched the same building Graham's new LLC had been registered under. It wasn't a mistake, it was a decision. They had left together or separately, I didn't know, but they were orbiting the same coordinates again. And somehow they had circled right back toward me. Not for love, not for repair, for work. Her firm had submitted a joint bid to collaborate on a cultural pavilion project. Reyes was shortlisted. I closed the folder, sat back, and stared at the ceiling. I had a choice. I could pull the file, tell Catherine the history, block the bid, or I could do nothing. Not out of passivity, but out of power. Because sometimes refusing to engage isn't surrender, it's evolution. At lunch, Catherine sat beside me on the bench behind the office. She glanced at the folder in my lap. "You saw the name." I nodded. She didn't press. After a while, she said, "I'm not asking you to work with her, just asking if this building matters more than what happened before it." I didn't answer right away, because I didn't want to lie. Then I said, "Let the committee vote. If her bid rises on merit, fine, but I won't co-lead with her. Not again." Catherine nodded. And just like that, the past no longer dictated the future. It just existed beside it, and that was enough. That night I walked the perimeter of the Riverview site one more time. No cranes yet, just boundary markers and frost-covered soil. I stood at the eastern corner, the one where sunlight would hit the glass facade first thing every morning. Then I pulled out Graham's letter, read it once more, and buried it in the dirt beneath my feet. No ceremony, no anger, just release. The kind that doesn't come with applause, but settles deep in the bones, the kind that holds. The cranes went up in March, quiet at first, just low rumblings in the pre-dawn light, steel girders inching toward the sky like fingers reaching for second chances. The Riverview Civic Complex had officially broken ground, and with it came the rush. Suddenly, city officials started visiting more. Construction vendors are called 3 times a day. Deadlines no longer lived on paper, they bled into every conversation. Even Catherine, usually so level, had started glancing at the budget spreadsheet like it was a prayer she couldn't finish. And that's when it happened. A suggestion, disguised as logic. It came from a subcontractor rep during a logistics meeting. He was young, sharp-suited, and confident in the way people are when they think you've already agreed with them. "We've run a comparative analysis," he said, tapping his iPad. "If we switch to the ZR5 support composite instead of the original R3, we could shave nearly $280,000 off materials throughout Phase 2. I already knew the numbers. ZR5 was within legal tolerance, but barely. Its performance degraded faster under high wind torsion, a known trade-off. The Riverview roof structure was designed to breathe. It relied on flex under lateral load to reduce stress cracking. Changing the material would shift the behavior, marginally, but permanently." Jason was the first to speak. "That's a mistake," he said, clear and direct. "ZR5 can't carry lateral fatigue like R3, not over the 20-year life cycle. We'll end up compensating with bracing that wasn't designed into the original load map." The room went quiet. Jason looked at me. I looked at the subcontractor, who smirked and said, "Hey, just offering options. No need to get defensive." And that was the moment I felt it. The pull. The familiar one. The voice that whispers, "Just let it slide. Save the money. Hit the deadline. You're not cutting corners, just adjusting expectations." I'd heard that voice before. In Graham's office. In boardrooms where silence was more profitable than integrity. But this time someone else had stood up before me. Jason. And now he was watching to see who I was. I leaned back, closed the folder, looked at the room. Then I said, "We don't build for 20 months. We have built for 20 years. R3 stays." The subcontractor raised his eyebrows. "Your call," he said, but I saw it in his eyes, the quiet judgment. To him, I was just another overly principled dinosaur holding up progress. Let him think that. I didn't need to win the argument. I just needed to keep the building standing. After the meeting, Jason caught up with me in the hallway. He was tense, not sure if I'd back him up or hang him out to dry. "You were right," I said simply. He blinked, then exhaled. "Thanks for not folding." I looked him in the eye. "You're not here to be agreeable. You're here to see what I can't." He nodded. Didn't say more. Didn't need to. Respect in our world is usually wordless, like steel beneath concrete. A week later, I received a call from a senior city planner. She opened with a compliment, then a pressure point. We're getting inquiries from council members, some concern over materials cost return on investment. Are you open to flexing specs on interior support systems? There it was again. Not corruption, just erosion. Tiny chisel taps at the base of principle. I told her what I told everyone. We don't adjust the building to match the budget. We adjust the budget to match the truth. She went quiet, then said, "That's a brave stance." "No," I replied. "It's just the load-bearing one." Back at the site, construction moved forward. Steel went up. Foundations poured clean. No gaps, no ghost edits, no backdoor approvals. And with every clean inspection, I felt something harden inside me. Not arrogance, conviction. Because I had seen what happened when men traded certainty for favor. I had watched structures rise on compromised promises. And I had buried the reputation of the man who taught me how to justify them. I wouldn't become him. Not even when no one would know. Because I would know. Near the end of that month, Catherine asked me to speak at a fundraising dinner for the project. Just 5 minutes. I said no at first. But then I thought of Jason, and the intern who'd stayed late to recalculate drainage overflow for the community garden space, and the mother who sent a handwritten letter saying her autistic son was finally excited about a building because it looks like it wants to breathe. So I stood at that podium, plain suit, no script, no slides, and I said, buildings can lie. They can stand just long enough for someone else to get the credit. But eventually, they tell the truth. Through cracks, through echoes, through the way people feel inside them. This project isn't just steel. It's a promise that we will never again build something dishonest and call it beautiful. No applause, just a quiet room, until someone finally stood up, then another, and the room shifted from quiet to still, the kind of stillness that doesn't beg for recognition. It just acknowledges the weight of what was said and holds it. When I got home that night, Jason had left something in my office chair. A small sketch, Riverview drawn in pencil. But this time, beneath the foundation lines, he'd written something in the corner. This time it will stand. I placed it in my drawer, not as a trophy, as a reminder, because it wasn't about the building anymore. It was about what we refused to compromise on to get there. And that was the real weight, and the real wind it had to withstand. The doors opened at 7:03 a.m. No ribbon, no press cameras, no speeches, just the steady creak of glass panels pivoting open and the quiet rhythm of shoes on new concrete. The Riverview Civic Complex was complete, and it belonged to the public now. Not the architects, not the donors, not the committees. The building no longer needed me. It had become its own. I arrived just before dawn. Stood across the street, coffee in hand, collar turned up against the breeze. Watched as the early risers trickled in. A young woman in scrubs heading for the health wing. A man with a stroller pausing at the map display. 2 teens are pointing to the rooftop garden sign and laughing. The building held them gently, welcomed them like it had always been there. No fanfare, just function, warmth, shelter. Exactly as we intended. Exactly as I'd hoped. Inside, Jason was already on site. He texted me a photo, south corridor holding well. That light you designed hits perfectly at 7:09. He didn't say more. He didn't need to. Engineers speak in shadows and angles, in tolerance margins and steel ratios. But what we build, if we do it right, some places carry more than weight. They carry people, their stories, their grief, their beginnings. I didn't attend the donor brunch. Catherine gave the remarks. She made sure to name every person on the team. She didn't name me. That was our agreement. No spotlight, no plaque. I'd had enough of names on walls. What mattered was the wall itself, and that it would still be standing long after we were gone. I spent the afternoon walking the edges of the building, running my fingers across the seams, not checking, just remembering. Each beam held a memory. The moment Jason caught that fatigue miscalculation. The day the interns argued for natural ventilation in the reading rooms. The night I rewrote the ramp access plan so a veteran in a wheelchair could enter with his daughter beside him. None of that made headlines, but it made a structure, one that didn't lie, one that didn't forget who it was for. Around 4 p.m., I found a bench under the curved southern archway, sat alone, watched shadows stretch across the pavement as the sun slid west, and that's when I felt it. A strange stillness, not silence, not absence, completion. It doesn't roar, it doesn't ask for attention. It just settles into your chest like a breath you didn't realize you were holding. And finally, let go. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, foreign area code. I almost ignored it. But curiosity tugged harder than caution. A message. No words. Just a photo. A child no more than 6 running through the main corridor of Riverview, laughing, arms wide, chasing the morning light pouring through the eastern slats. Behind her in soft focus stood a woman, half-shadowed, but I knew her profile. Elena. No caption, no signature, just the image. A quiet offering, not of reconciliation, not of regret, just recognition that something we built still held meaning, even after everything, even after us. I didn't respond. I didn't save the photo. But I didn't delete it either. I let it sit in my phone like an archived drawing from a project that never broke ground but taught you something about how to build better the next time. As evening settled, I stood one last time beneath the arch. The building behind me glowed soft and gold. From somewhere inside, I heard a child's voice echo through the atrium, high and bright, full of the kind of joy no calculation could ever design. And I smiled. Not because they would remember me, but because they wouldn't have to. I didn't build Riverview so they'd remember my name. I built it so they'd forget the cold, forget the weight, feel safe, held, capable of beginning. That was the justice I had waited for. Not revenge, not recognition, just knowing. They can walk through it now, and it won't fall. And maybe that's the only kind of justice that truly lasts. Here's what I've learned. Not every betrayal deserves fire. Sometimes the most just thing you can do is to keep building quietly, steadily until the people who left you behind realize they're not even on the map anymore. You don't need to destroy them. You just need to live a life strong enough to stand without them. Not out of revenge, but out of restoration. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Hit like if you've ever had to rebuild yourself, and subscribe if you believe that quiet strength is still strength. Because sometimes, the structure that holds best is the one built in silence.